A ransomware attack on your business data can be a truly nasty experience, a piece of software brazenly taking your data while boasting in your face what it will do if you don't pay up. It can only take clicking a link to a website you're unfamiliar with, or downloading and running an attachment off an email from someone you think is legitimate. And before you know it, important files on your system have been encrypted, or your data has been outright stolen, with a message appearing demanding that you pay money to the software's creators in order to get your files back, or to ensure they don't use your data for nefarious purposes. That's all assuming that the unscrupulous actor that created the software won't just leave you dead in the water with your encrypted files anyway, after you've paid up the not inconsiderable ransom. But today, with the help of Synology, we're going to demonstrate what can happen to your files in a ransomware attack, and detailed precautions you can take to ensure you can recover from the worst case scenario. We have set up a very small representative network here of a small office space. 2 NUCs will represent our office, each with their own end user, with a third NUC in the middle here acting as the domain controller. These are all networked to this Synology DS2422+, a 12-bay NAS that will act as our network's backup. For the purposes of this demo, consider this full of important, critical day-to-day business data that needs to be protected for the functional running of our business. Now, on this USB stick, we have the WannaCry ransomware. This now defunct software caused major problems for the NHS in May of 2017, costing the health service over £90 million and worldwide hit over 200,000 machines at a total estimated cost of £6 billion in lost productivity. After WannaCry makes its way onto your system, it directly targets any and all files on your system that aren't system critical, rapidly encrypting them and making them entirely unusable to you before forcing a window to pop up demanding several $100s in Bitcoin to get your data back. It then makes use of other exploits in Windows to try and distribute itself across your local network, copying itself across your systems until every computer has been infected. WannaCry is now detected by practically every antivirus, so running it with security enabled is not really possible anymore. For the purposes of this demonstration, we have disabled security to be able to use WannaCry as an example theoretical unknown virus, one that current security measures may not be prepared for if someone does happen to click on a dodgy link. Obviously, we don't want this infecting any actual data, so this entire network is self-contained with a bunch of random files. All we have to do is take this file and run it. Pretty much immediately, our desktop files have already been encrypted, with copies of the WannaCry exe file appearing all over the place, and every file visible is being changed to an encrypted variant with a random name. We can also see on the NAS itself, as the reach of the ransomware goes through the network, the activity on the hard drives ramping up as every file there is also being hit. And if we go and look at the network attached Synology drives, you can see that the virus has also been able to discover these files, converting as many as it can into its own encrypted format. However, the Write Once secure folder clearly shows its capabilities here. Using Write Once Read Many technology, modifications to any files that are stored there, both accidental or malicious, are prevented. Even though WannaCry has been successful in creating new encrypted versions of each file, it has been unable to remove the original versions, leaving them intact and recoverable in such an emergency. As the Synology runs on a Linux-based environment, this particular piece of ransomware won't be able to affect the Synology itself. So there's a good chance that you can reclaim some of the files directly off of the Synology by using one of the USB ports at the back using a clean USB drive. That way, if there's any particularly important pieces of data or files that you need to ensure that you can use immediately, you can reclaim them before running any of the restoration procedure. So what does this mean for your data? Well, unfortunately, if you don't perform any backup of your drives, the data on this will be lost forever. The only way you can recover from this kind of attack is by having a solid data backup strategy. Synology recommends the 3-2-1 rule. Keep 3 backups of any sensitive, irreplaceable or otherwise important data. 2 of these should be stored on-site on different mediums, such as one on an online backup server and another on an offline tape backup or on cloud storage. Then 1 more copy should be stored off-site, either on drives or tapes held at another location, or uploaded to a safe and trusted cloud storage service. Synology provides 2 different tools that will be useful to us in clearing this mess. Active Backup for Business and Hyper Backup. Active Backup for Business creates bare metal backup images of each system on the network, storing these images on the NAS in a secure area that, at least in this case, the encryption attacks can't access, though I must stress, even these should be backed up to alternative mediums where possible, so that in the unlikely event an even more meticulous attack is able to affect the protected area, it can't remove all possibility of recovery. In the event of a system getting overrun with a virus, this allows you to revert the system to exactly how it was the last time a backup was made, which is hopefully before the infection hit. It can even store multiple versions of the system image to ensure that there is always a viable option to revert to. Hyper Backup can then be set up to upload important files to Synology's cloud storage service, in the event that your on-site backups also become corrupted. You can set the entire storage medium to be backed up to the cloud at regular intervals, or you can select particular files and folders that are absolutely essential to your day-to-day business procedures to be frequently backed up, to ensure absolutely minimum downtime should an event such as this strike your data. The procedure for restoring these systems is incredibly simple. First of all, we want to make sure that every single system on the network is currently unplugged, to make sure that there's no chance that the infection can spread throughout the network any further once we start clearing the drives. Secondly, we're going to require at least one clean computer or phone in order to begin the process. We used a live USB copy of Ubuntu to perform this recovery, which isn't necessarily the safest procedure, but with the Windows systems all turned off and unplugged from the network, we should be safe to continue. So firstly, we're going to reset the NAS itself using the Hyper Backup C2 Cloud process. In our case, as we're using a domain controller to provide IP addresses throughout the network, we need to manually set up our IP and ISP details to be able to connect to the NAS. Once connected, we can log in and run the Hyper Backup recovery. As nearly everything on the drive has been hit, we want to restore the entire system. This erases everything currently on the drives, which should remove any lingering executables that WannaCry has placed there. You can be more selective in this, but given WannaCry's broad pattern of attack, going after anything that doesn't prevent Windows from running, it may leave the system vulnerable to future attacks if you don't reset it this way. Then we select C2 storage to grab our files from the cloud and select the most recent version we believe is safe. This may take some time depending on your internet speed, as we're pulling our entire NAS's data off of the cloud, in this case around 60 gigabytes. Given our network connection here, it should have taken only around an hour or two to perform this complete restore, but it actually took around 2 days to complete fully. Synology have told us that this is not expected behaviour, and personally I'd put this down to some kind of interaction with the lockdown network we created to prevent WannaCry from being able to leak into the rest of our building's network. Then for each of the user systems, we use this recovery USB stick. We simply boot from this on each machine to pull the backup system image from the Synology to reset the machine to a prior state. We start up each NUC unplugged from the network just in case the bootable USB doesn't work. This prevents us from accidentally booting back into Windows and immediately reconnecting to and infecting the NAS. Once we're in the USB bootable environment, we can reattach our network. Again, in this case, we need to manually enter our connection details, as we don't have the domain controller available to provide that to us automatically. Then we log on to the NAS when prompted. From here, we simply select the system image that we require for each system and hit Next. Here we select entire device restore, and after a few moments we're given a list of available image versions for each of our NUCs. This is useful to us just in case whatever has infected our systems has managed to get in during a time when one of the backups was being taken. Finally, we review the partition information to make sure that it's all correct, then we hit Next, then OK. The process for this only takes a few minutes at a time for our 250 gig SSDs, though perhaps a bit longer for systems that actually have a lot of user data stored on them compared to our relatively clean Windows installs. And just like that, our business is back up and running with most of our files intact. Obviously the timescale involved will be much greater with a larger network. This one took about 2 or 3 hours to complete overall. If you have a larger spread of files across a larger volume of drives, you will have to wait for all of those drives to be pulled from the cloud, and it's important to make sure that you pick the files that you need to store on the cloud, as you will have limited space. In our case here, we were able to store the entire NAS worth of data just in virtue of us having a very limited amount of data for the demonstration. But if you have this kind of thing kitted out with a dozen 18 terabyte drives, uploading 200 terabytes on a frequent basis may be too much for a small or even medium-sized business to consider. But with the risk of data loss to this scale potentially being so great, we would always recommend to try and back up as much data as humanly possible. Now, there's very little need to worry about these viruses popping up on your system unprovoked. It usually requires social engineering to get a user to attempt to run a file, perhaps tricking them into thinking it's a software update to something they use regularly, or targeting a less tech-savvy accountant by claiming the file to be important monetary documents. For most attack vectors that ransomware uses, not downloading and running files from people and places you don't know is 95% of the battle. For the rest of the battle, backup solutions like this one are your strongest defence. Synology very kindly lent us this DS2422 Plus for this demonstration, a 12-bay NAS perfect for small and medium businesses. Its 12 bays allow for a large array of storage, and its Ryzen-based processor provides great file handling performance in multi-user environments. Its quad 1GB network ports support both link aggregation and failover for increased file transfer performance over the network or increased stability respectively, and its PCIe Gen 3 X4 slot allows for further expansion to support 10GB networking or NVMe cache drives. The models we supply come with either 3 or 5 year warranty as standard, with upgrade options for an additional 2 years on the 3-year models. Please visit the link in the description to find out more.